This episode was brought to you by Farnell, your global distributor of electronic components, products, and solutions. Visit farnell.com.
We're live.
We are indeed.
How exciting. And Pete, you're back from all your travels.
Hello, yeah, I'm back, refreshed and raring to go. My brain is fully engaged.
Excellent. So first of all, we just want to check that everyone can see us okay and can hear us okay. And we're looking off to, we've got a TV over there, hiding Erin, as it happens.
I'm here. I'm always here. I'm always hiding away.
We like it when we can't see you, Erin.
Strategically placed Erin, or TV,
and
or both.
Erin is going to be working the buttons today. So if anything goes wrong, it's her fault, basically.
Rude.
Which is how we do things anyway. We're being told we are loud and clear. Hello to everybody. Very nice to see you all. How was WWDC for you? Did you get what you wanted from it? Did you get what you expected from it? What did you expect from it, Pete?
Expect or hope?
Either.
I was hoping for an announcement on Mac Pro.
Mm-hmm.
So from that point of view, a little bit disappointed. But I think it's very easy with these things because we're expecting certain announcements or certain products or certain sneak peeks. It's easy to let that color and taint what was actually quite an interesting WWDC. There was lots of interesting things. And I don't think they once called it Dub. So that's a bonus.
We can all be thankful for that. I've got to say, I steered clear of a lot of the rumors. I've been keeping myself away from them for a couple of months, just so I could try and experience this. Reality is, of course, I knew what was coming because it got leaked, and it's impossible not to see it, which is a shame. But I was expecting a Mac Pro.
Were you?
Mm.
And we didn't get one.
We didn't get one.
No.
And WWDC is the place where the Mac Pros do tend to get released.
So what do you conclude from that?
I think we'll talk about this more in a bit, but I think they are struggling a bit. I don't think the M1 could do what needs to be done for the Pro.
Okay.
The PCI Express and other things, I think they're still refining it. Maybe they've stepped that up again with the M2, but we're going to talk all about that. M2, of course, that getting announced, that's quite a big thing, although we won't see those machines until next month.
Yeah.
But we'll take a look at the new MacBook Air, the new MacBook Pro 13-inch with M2. We'll give you some thoughts on that, and talk about some of the other key things. I think for us, probably the most interesting things, and hopefully for you guys too, it's talking about the M2. It's talking about those new MacBooks, and for me, I'm quite interested in new features in iPadOS.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments already. It seems that a lot of you are quite excited about iPadOS. So, yeah, how were you feeling about that? Because there were some things you were probably hoping for, weren't there?
Yeah, I don't think it's gone quite as far as it needed to. But I mean, people have been talking about an Apple equivalent of DeX. You know, if you get a Samsung tablet and you dock it, you get this kind of desktop experience, if you like, and we're some way short of that, but I still think it's positive steps.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Erin, did you have a particular highlight?
Yeah, the sharing thing with Crunchyroll, I'm really excited about in messages. I cannot wait for that because I love Crunchyroll.
Do you know what Crunchyroll is, Dave?
No.
Shall I tell you? Would you like to know?
I don't think anybody wants to know what that is. So let's just move on.
Okay.
This is the youth thing, isn't it?
No, it's so cool.
I know what Crunchyroll is, and as you go to great pains to point out to me, I am hardly a youth anymore. So, yeah.
Is it animations and stuff? Animated content?
Not just animations, but anime.
Okay. Right. Well,
yeah.
There we go. Very good. You quite like the whole Japanese thing. Earlier on, Erin was speaking Japanese. Now,
that's not true.
You have to do this. You have to do some Japanese.
Go on, Erin.
I don't speak Japanese. I don't know what you're talking about.
You sounded pretty authentic when you were doing it earlier.
I do not know a lick of Japanese. No
okay. Konnichiwa.
All right. So I think make yourselves known in the comments if you would like to hear Erin talking in Japanese. I don't know what she's saying. It's probably rude, but who knows? As always, we'll be taking some of your comments, and Erin will endeavour to put those up on the screen so that Pete and I can see them. And I've got to try and resist looking at the TV and try and look at the camera instead.
Every time you look at the TV, you see yourself. So that should
It's
be
harsh,
a
isn't it?
dissuasion. Do we want to just quickly review some of the stuff that perhaps we just want to touch on briefly, like iOS 16?
No.
No? Okay. We'll move on from
let's look. Everybody wants to talk about M2.
I made loads of notes on iOS 16.
I enjoyed watching you make all
ran
of those
out of
notes.
steam. So, yeah.
I think someone's made a comment there about iPhone being used as a FaceTime camera. That looked really janky to me, but we'll discuss that. So let's start with the fun stuff. Let's start with the new M2 chip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. So just summing up what was put in it, we don't want to bore you to death with what's already been said, but a continual focus on power efficiency, so maximum output.
So can I just translate that?
Yeah.
You know, we're focused on power efficiency, they said, rather than making power gains. In other words, we can't beat the latest from Intel with our M2 chip. Therefore, we'll just focus on the fact that we're, consuming much less power. And that's great because the vast majority of people, of course, don't need
all that power.
Don't need it. Yeah. But there will be some who do need more power.
Yeah, but not from a MacBook Air.
Well, quite.
I mean, what?
Why are they comparing a MacBook Air? Well, now, you see, I say that we're going to have to get onto the pricing for the MacBook Air, and we'll hold fire on that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, second generation 5 nanometer processor. What do they mean by second generation, Dave?
They mean that they're using the 5 nanometer process that they use for the M1 again.
Brilliant.
A second time.
However,
no, there might be some minor improvements.
They did compare an M1 to an M2, and the M2 on the comparison physically looked bigger. But they did say it has 20 billion transistors, which is 25% more than an M1. So it's either denser or bigger or both. Someone said that about me once.
It's bigger, isn't it? It looks about maybe 25% bigger, didn't it?
Yeah, about that.
So that might be why.
More memory bandwidth,
100. Yeah, I think it was 70 before.
Yeah. So it's saying it's 50% quicker, which would work. Up to 24 gig of unified memory.
That's a good improvement.
Yeah.
And that really bodes well for the next generation of the M2 chips. So when we start seeing the M2 Pro and the Max versions of the chips being able to spec more memory, that'll be great. So overall, it sounded like it was a reasonable upgrade. I mean, we're talking about the M2 being an upgrade to the M1. It's not an upgrade to the M1 Pro, the M1 Max, or the M1 Ultra.
No.
So it has to sit below those. Where it will be slightly better than those chips is in single core performance. But yeah. I don't think it's going to be a big improvement.
No. It's got a better media engine than the M1 as well. That's worth mentioning. So it's going to be
and a ProRes engine as well, which the M1 doesn't have. That's only in the Pro and the Max.
So
which accounts for some of those extra transistors.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think? Let's talk about the actual MacBook Air M2 then.
Okay, before we do that, we've got lots of comments coming in, so we ought to just
loads of comments.
Loads and loads of comments. I'm interested in Neil Lewis's comment. Erin, let's start with that one.
Is that?
Moved over from Samsung S7 Plus to M1 iPad purely for video editing. 16 update. They said developer
tomorrow or today.
Yeah.
Public beta next month.
Yeah.
And they normally September time they tend to go to a release around then. So that's the sort of time you're thinking about.
And yeah, I mean I've got the S8, Samsung S8, which isn't much different to the S7 in terms of performance. And the M1 has a lot more potential. Whether we're going to actually be able to see that being used, well, we'll talk about that in a bit.
About that, yeah.
Jose's comment there. The Air has a notch. The Notchbook Air.
How do you feel about that? It's very divisive, isn't it?
I feel like a lot of people are going to be very unhappy about that. But if you are unhappy about it,
don't buy it.
Don't buy it.
Get yourself a MacBook Pro 13-inch. with its.
Interesting though, when they did put them side by side, and they also made the comment, didn't they, about how they've raised the screen up to make space for the menu bar around the camera.
Yeah, absolutely. I did think actually a few points in the keynote they were quite. They were sort of almost mocking themselves in their own marketing department, which I thought was quite good, quite refreshing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Is
it Jan or
Very
Jan,
kind of you.
maybe
Thank
for your
you.
donation. Still no dedicated 3D ray tracing cores on the M2. Good to see Apple not taking 3D seriously. I'm guessing the clown emoji indicates that's
So it's a bit of sarcasm.
there. Ray tracing is certainly something that the Pro machines will, or the Mac Pro would need. I would think it was going to be useful to real professionals.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe it's coming. I suspect they're focusing very much on the same thing that NVIDIA are doing with, is it DLSS? I'm not much into the gamings. So, but it's that kind of idea of scaling up stuff and then using AI and machine learning to make it look good.
Yes. Yeah. They did talk about that in the gaming section, which I thought was quite good. Although we can talk about that in a bit more in a minute.
We will. Just to be clear as well, the M2 gaming potential being better than the M1 is mainly due to having 2 extra GPU cores if you spec that particular chip, and we'll get to that in a moment.
So much to go through, so many comments already.
Yeah.
Start select. Fun fact, 24 gig of memory is available in configurations of either 8, 16 and 24. As I showed 2 memory models, I initially expected it to be either 12 or 24. Yeah, thank you for that. That's
so that means that you'll end up with a
redundant
16 and an 8.
What do you mean?
If there's two actual memory chips, one of them will be a 16.
Oh yes, if you go for the 24 in total. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, so let's just talk about the MacBook Air, and then we'll talk about some of the other features, and we'll take some more questions as we go.
We've obviously covered the notch. One of the really important things to note about this machine is it comes in 4 colors.
Which color are you most excited about, Erin? Something tells me that you will have taken note of the colors.
I was sad there wasn't a purple, but I liked the blue. I thought it was decent.
Decent.
Yeah, it's not purple.
No. And it looks like the MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch, but it is clearly slightly thinner. So we've got 2 Thunderbolt ports and a headphone jack.
And MagSafe.
So that is better, I suppose, isn't it, than the existing one? Because that
they said a 20% reduction in volume. So obviously volume can come from anywhere, but they did say it was 11.3 millimeters thing. I think the other one was 12, something like that. I seem to remember that being the headline number.
It's the same as these though. They're not super chunky, but they look chunky. There's something about the design that just makes them look chunky.
Yeah, that's always been my excuse. Liquid Retina display.
Yeah, so that's nothing special. But although it is now a wider color gamut, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got the billions of colors. So great.
That's good.
And slightly brighter. 500 nits compared to 400 nits.
Which is useful.
You like nits, don't you, Erin?
She's got what? Nits. Oh, okay.
I think we did that joke before.
We probably have. Good to have the improved FaceTime camera.
Yes, I think so. And probably better speakers, although I always thought the speakers in the MacBook Air were better than they had any right to be. Got a 3-mic array. Yeah, same keyboard as what we've got on the MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch as well. So full height function keys.
And again, fanless. So pretty silent in its operation.
Yeah. So pretty good. So also supporting fast charge, as long as you buy the optional 67-watt fast charger. And if you do that, you then can't have the new USB charger with 2 USB-C ports. So, yeah, difficult choices. Let's just take Jan's comment. Thank you again, Jan. So you are referring to 3D rendering with ray tracing. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Apple Silicon is just not there yet. I'm sure it will come, but for now, serious 3D artists probably aren't going to be picking Apple Mac, I shouldn't have thought. And I think that the lack of a Mac Pro announcement is is not great news, is it, for the professionals?
It's going to get people jittery, isn't it? Because they're going to be wondering what, where, when, why. Because there are so many questions, as we've discussed many times on the channel and on the podcast, about Mac Pro and how Apple are going to deal with it. And this is going to do nothing to settle the nerves of those pros who are perhaps wondering what they should be doing, whether they should be transitioning away from Apple or sticking and waiting. It can't be easy. Is anyone listening in that boat where you're a Mac Pro user, you need to use Mac Pro for all the upgradability options, the extendability options? Are you in that boat where you're like, I really need to replace, but I don't know whether to jump ship or stay and wait? Must be a tricky time. Let us know.
So it's a music producer by the name of Neil Parfit, and he bought a Mac Pro when they first came out, the rack-mounted one. I'm pretty sure he went for the 28 core, a pretty decent spec. So he spent a lot of money on it. And just recently, he did an update video where he and another audio professional had tried out a fully loaded Mac Studio with the Ultra chip in it. And they were trying to get their workflow in Logic to work so that they could, do work on the Mac Studio and then port it over to the Mac Pro and use it in other. They found it unworkable to the point where they ended up returning the machine.
It's
a $10,000 Mac Studio. So it seems to me that for serious professionals who need that kind of extendability, the PCI Express slots, the current range of Mac machines are not cutting it.
No.
And I think Apple maybe have still got work to do.
Yeah, and there's an interesting question here from Chris Ware. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
When does the 2-year transition officially finish? Well, that's a really good question, because it depends when you start counting it from. So if you started counting from when Apple Silicon was announced, it's now, because it was announced at WWDC 2020. If you count it from when the first Apple Silicon became publicly available, it's November of this year, which is when the M1s were released, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where Apple are counting from.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear.
Do you think they were originally counting from that date before all the supply chain woes and everything?
It's impossible to say. Apple has obviously been affected by supply chain issues. I think it's interesting, though, that they're offering a new MacBook Air for sale when they're struggling to fulfill orders for the MacBook Pro. It's quite difficult to get hold of the M1 Max variety. So I've heard of some people who place their orders, at the start of the year, and they still haven't had them. Crazy.
Yeah, it does seem like a bit of an own goal releasing the M2 MacBook Air when you consider that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting comment from Tinus Pania. Can you highlight that one for us, Erin? So you probably are busy doing the research. We've watched the keynote and come straight on to the live show. So we haven't had any time to do the research, but is that the case? M2 then is still USB 4, not Thunderbolt 4.
Wow.
That is disappointing if that's the case, because when I'm talking about Apple struggling a little bit with the chips, one of the big things has been the Thunderbolt controller. So on the M1, Thunderbolt works okay. Its USB is pretty poor. And then when we got to the M1 Pro and M1 Max, they'd obviously changed that. And USB performance, with external drives and things has definitely improved, but it still isn't at the same level as an Intel Mac.
No.
So they've got a little way to go. You'd think that they would have done that with the M2, but they're not doing that.
No, it seems odd, but again, how much of the supply chain issues, not using this as an excuse, but how much of that has completely, Apple would have had a roadmap for this whole transition, and they've probably had to revise that numerous times due to supply chain issues. So maybe this is just the best they can do with what they've got now, but it's definitely it's an omission. It's disappointing.
Can we highlight Old Finnish Farmer's comment? So still on a 12-core trash can Mac Pro. Oh, do love a trash can. With all of your hardware, 3 Apollo quad interfaces, satellite devices, so waiting for a new machine.
Yeah. So you're not going to be moving to Windows or anything. You're just going to wait until our Mac Pro is out and available.
I think this is something as well that in the audio world, it's very difficult to do that. If you're into Logic, then that is Mac only, and therefore you must be on a Mac. And a lot of studios and movie producers, all of that kind of thing, they want Logic. They want to work with Logic.
Two salient comments from the same person, David Stevenson, the one at the top there. First of all, Erin, a lot of audio software isn't ported to native Apple Silicon yet. The industry, that particular industry, is very slow to migrate. Completely agree with that. I think there's a lot of work for them to do there to do that as well.
Is there a lot of work? I mean,
or is it just not
there are certain
financially viable? Certain
companies, I would say, within the audio industry who are very slow to update things, but not all. And I mean, I have some Pro audio gear. I don't know how to use it, but I've got some Pro audio gear, and that is working fine with Apple Silicon. I have found a few sort of little niggles, but
nothing major.
Nothing major, but I do know of lots of interfaces and plugins and other things where things aren't working properly. So yeah, it is true.
And again, another comment from David Stevenson. This is your two salient comments for tonight, David. You can take a coffee and relax now. The Air isn't really for people who drive 2 studio displays, is it? I actually think that's a really fair comment, because yes, while it would be nice to have that, I mean, I would consider myself a fairly hard professional user. I'm not a power user by any means, but I rarely need more than 2 displays. So how many people who the MacBook Air is actually targeted at are going to need 2 displays? I think the danger is, because you've got something that is capable of doing a lot more than something else at its price point, there's that natural expectation, well, I use it for pro work.
Is exactly what happened with the original M1 release. Yeah. So a couple more comments from Old Finnish Farmer. Logic Pro is the key here. So originally Logic was an application that was available on Windows and Mac, I think, and Apple bought it and then made it Mac only. So a lot of audio pros got locked into Mac way back when, and that's kind of stuck. Maybe that's your case as well. Audio workflow much better in macOS, in my opinion. Completely agree with you on that. There are some things that PCs do really well, but audio on a Mac is great. Yeah. And then Old Finnish Farmer also said that he was about to buy the new Mac Pro, but then M1 came out, and you got the M1 MacBook Pro. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I was about to buy a Mac Pro, and then I bought a PC.
How's that working out for you?
Since I got the Mac Studio for Tom to use to edit, I have to be honest, it's not as fast as my PC workstation, not by any stretch, but for the stuff that I need it for, does it matter if it takes a bit longer? I just have an extra cup of coffee and save on the electric bill.
That's never a bad thing. Actually, that was a really interesting exercise we went through earlier on electric bills. Perhaps we'll cover that a bit later for business users particular.
But let's get into the pricing on the MacBook Air, and let's spec it up. So we've got 4 colors. They call them Starlight, Midnight, Silver, and Space Gray. Starlight is like a
gold,
rose goldy type thing, but not as rose gold.
It's more starlighty.
I mean, yeah, whatever. And Midnight, that must be the blue one.
That's the blue one.
Okay,
yeah.
And then Silver and Space Gray. Okay. And we mentioned the notch. It's got the notch. That's going to be devices for some people. So we're using the MacBooks with the notch. I have mine in dark mode, and I have to say, I don't really notice it. It's not a problem for me.
I actually see it. I don't have mine in dark mode, but in fact, I think mine might be in auto, but I just feel as I got an extra bit of screen, as Apple point out.
Yeah, and it is true. When you see the MacBook Air next to the 13-inch MacBook Pro, you can see that is the case. What I would say to anybody who's really put off by the notch, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that is just so ugly. It's such a compromise. But just try one out, go in the Apple store and just have a play with it and see whether it actually gets in the way of your work. I wouldn't let it stop you from having what is a genuinely good machine.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, it makes you physically ill. Just the thought of the notch. Some people seem to be really affected by it. So pricing.
Yes.
Now, we were talking about this as it was announced, and we're thinking they'll just replace the M1 MacBook Air, so it will be at $999 or £999.
Yeah, that's what I said, isn't it? And I was wrong. Yeah.
So if you want to bring in a replacement model of something, but charge an extra, say, $200 or pounds, Should we just use the term dollar pounds because they seem to be the same price? If you want to charge an extra $200 pounds, what you do is you pollers is you keep the existing machine available just to confuse customers, and then you bring out the new one at a more expensive price point.
Yes, that's what Apple have done. Can we just put up a comment that has caught my eye? The bottom one, Erin. No. James A. Photography. They won't. How dare you? I'm absolutely offended.
Everything clashes with your shirts,
including your face.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, you may make the comment about the display limitations will put people off upgrading. Obviously, I would consider you, because I know what you do for a living, to be a power user. I appreciate you want the 3 displays. And actually, to be fair, in all other respects, the MacBook Air M2 would be a great machine for the sort of work you're doing. But I take your point that if you're looking for something at a slightly lower price point, that may be a game changer for you.
So just for everyone else who doesn't know what Chris does, that's developing.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to give away too much personal information.
I don't think anyone will be able to track him down on that basis.
So best not to put his address in the
Probably,
comments.
Probably not.
Thanks, Chris.
I've seen a couple of comments go past where people do want you to speak Japanese, Erin. So just,
yeah, I have seen a few. So on the count of 3,
are you ready to go?
do you want to?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Bonjour.
Oh.
Je m'appelle Erin. Est-ce que ça descend?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Hopeless.
quality content from the
Absolutely ridiculous.
She
She did it earlier. No one's going to ever believe me.
I don't speak Japanese. I don't know what you're talking
I didn't
about.
say you did speak
did
Japanese.
she
I said you were.
actually speak Japanese, or did she?
She sounded like she was saying something in Japanese, but then you remember that Apple brought on the guy from Capcom,
yeah.
who was indeed Japanese, quite obviously. And about 10 seconds into it, Erin goes, "He's Japanese." So
I know my stuff.
you do know your stuff.
Of course, you have been to France recently, haven't you, Erin?
I have.
Did you have
indeed.
any accidents or anything while you were out there?
Other than a slight chunk of my eye being poked out by a
Look,
friend of mine.
We did
It was
this on the
fine.
podcast. We don't need to
Yeah,
make any of the viewers feel sick now.
But all I just wanted to say is she got an eyeful in more than one way when she went to Paris.
Excellent.
Thank you. That was worth waiting for. Wasn't
That
it?
was not worth waiting
That was
for.
awful. That
Goodness.
was awful.
Start select. Can we have start select's comment? First of all, thank you very much. Very kind.
Isn't.
A lot of devices axed with this year's releases. iPad Air 2, iPad Mini 4, iPhone 6s, SE 1 and 7. So iPhone 7. Watch Series 3. A lot of Macs. 2013 Pro. 20. Yeah. Well, that's the nature of transitioning, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, it had to happen at some point. Good spot though. Like you said, we haven't really had a chance to digest anything yet. We've literally come from the sofas straight to the studio to offer our uninformed opinions.
Last time we did it the day after, and no one tuned in.
That's not true. Actually, loads of people tuned in.
So, look, this new MacBook Air then with the M2. So, Pete, can you just call up the spec page? So on the store, you can actually start specing these up. So we've got.
You can't actually order one though.
No, but you can spec it up. You can pretend like you are. So let's choose one with the new M2 chip. And the first thing that you're presented with now is a choice of 2 different M2s, just to keep things simple. So everything that Apple were talking about, those great improvements with the 10-core GPU, that's the expensive one. The standard one will get an 8-core GPU. Now, it's probably still too early to say what cores the M2 is based on. But if it's what I think it is, then what you're going to see is slightly improved performance.
Do you think it's Avalanche and Blizzard?
I think it's possible that it is,
okay,
based on the timeline. So basically the same cores that are in the A15. So if that's the case, you will expect to see slightly faster single core performance. Will you actually notice the difference in single core performance in day-to-day use? Probably not.
Compared to an M1?
Yeah.
Well, M1's already pretty good.
Yeah. Outside of benchmarking, I don't think it's going to make a real-world difference. The additional multi-core performance and the additional performance that Apple are talking about is when you're pushing the thing, presumably with all of the cores and with that additional memory bandwidth and potentially additional memory.
They did talk about peak performance versus average performance, didn't they?
So I don't think that the M2 is going to be a massive performance upgrade over M1. I don't believe that.
We were talking about this before, weren't we? We were talking about the difference between, was it the A14 and the A15 chips being marginal?
Yeah.
And this feels like something similar.
Yeah. It's an incremental thing. I will just take Michaeli's comment. Very kind of you. Thank you. Why is the 13-inch with touch bar and without MagSafe? I think Apple are just, they've got the tooling for that. I mean, the 13-inch MacBook Pro with touch bar, I'm surprised that it's not been discontinued.
It's compared to all the models now, it's starting to look a bit long in the tooth.
They're just squeezing every drop out of it, aren't they?
I wouldn't be surprised if it comes down to, again, it's a strategic decision based on what they've got in stock. So those sort of machined aluminium chassis, I wouldn't be surprised if they got a lot of those left over, and maybe they've just made the choice to fling an M2 in it. And they obviously have decided there's a market for it, but it's a good question.
Perhaps someone could check and see whether they're still selling the M1 version. But let's carry on with our little thing here.
Okay, so you want me to spec that? What colour do you want?
So the price in the UK for starters is actually £1,249.
So $50 less.
Is it?
Well, it's $1,299 on the $1,299.
So we'll go with UK pricing, and it's similar to the US pricing. So $1,249.
Not selling the M1 MacBook Pro 13.
Interesting. So they're in that case they're just they're just swapping it over, aren't they? Yep. So £1,249 gets you the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU. The GPU cores I think are slightly better again, but there's not a lot in it. So it's only 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. Still, on a laptop costing £1,249.
So do you think that's worth the £250 more?
No.
Over the M1 MacBook Air?
Not from a performance perspective. So you've got to make your decision on this based on features, I would say.
So you've got a different, because the M1 MacBook Air hasn't got a chassis redesign.
It's basically the same thing still. So you've still got Touch ID on that one.
Yep.
So you're getting a slightly better screen,
better camera,
better
charging, better connectivity and power.
Well, yeah. So you get, by virtue of the MagSafe port, you're getting 2 free USB 4 ports.
Yep.
Assuming that's what they are. Yeah. So is that worth £250? It might
and
be.
You can choose the color.
Might be to some people, and if like Erin, you need a blue one.
Yeah. You thought it was purple, didn't you?
I hoped it was purple, but it wasn't like the purple I wanted. So it's fine.
Okay.
Then we've got. So I think really, if you want to experience the M2, then you've got to step it up. So for £1,549, so this is another £300. This is now no longer by any stretch of. No one's going to call this a cheap laptop.
No.
Right. So this is, you get the same 8-core CPU, you get 2 additional GPU cores. That's not going to be night and day difference when it comes to gaming and other things that use those. Something we forgot to mention, of course, is it has a ProRes media engine.
Yes.
So if you are planning, although that seems a little bit odd for a consumer machine, if you're planning to buy a consumer machine for ProRes.
It does. So hold that thought, because it might tell us something about upgrade path and roadmap.
Okay. So we have 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports. They are indeed USB 4, not Thunderbolt 4. There is a difference. And you get the dual power adapter with that. So for your extra £300, you're getting 2 additional GPU cores and an additional charging port.
And more storage. You get twice the storage. It's 512 gig of storage.
But that's still 8 gigs of RAM. Now, of course, we know that with a Mac and the Apple Silicon, you can do a lot with 8 gigs of RAM, but still.
Shall I go ahead and configure it?
Go ahead and configure
What color do you want, by the way?
I think we have to go with midnight, surely, because it's the new color.
Well,
so
we're not buying it, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, I have chosen that.
So someone's just said in Belgium, the base model MacBook Air is base model €1,520. Wow, is that? So in Belgium, would that include VAT as well? Do you have what's your tax in Belgium? Someone else is saying that M1 Pro MacBook seems like a way better deal. 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gig SSD is just unacceptable. Yeah, agree. Okay, customize away, Pete.
Okay,
What are you going to do?
Shall I just go for it? Shall I max it out? Because that's normally what we do, isn't it?
And
Or
let's
do you
tell
want?
the
Shall we do
viewers-
a sensible one?
Well, look, you've
got to have 16 gig.
16
memory,
gigs
haven't
for an
you?
extra £200. Now, with the M1, going from 8 gigs to 16 gigs made a lot of difference.
You did.
If you're pushing the thing hard, if you're not pushing it hard, you probably won't see the difference. But otherwise, you will. Will anybody really notice a meaningful difference going from 16 to 24?
For another £200.
I personally wouldn't do that.
No. And I mean, we didn't really notice much difference between 24 gig and 32 gig on these Macs.
I mean, 32 and 64.
Was that what it was? Okay. So we'll go with 16. What about storage?
Look,
how would you advise on
an ultrabook, a premium ultrabook in 2022 should have at minimum 1 terabyte of fast SSD storage at minimum.
So for extra £200, I will go for 1 terabyte.
And bearing in mind, we get a slightly faster drive then at that point as well. So it comes with the dual USB-C, but we want to be able to charge quickly, don't we, Pete?
Well, I feel that would be reasonable. So should we go for the 67 watt power adapter?
I think so. And that doesn't change the price.
Doesn't change the price.
Wow.
Daisy in the Rain.
Bargain.
Thank you for your sticker.
Thank you very much.
Backlit keyboard.
Yeah, love it.
That's nice.
Very nice. So that takes us up to, are you ready for this, folks? A MacBook Air, £1,949 with 16 gigs of RAM and a terabyte. It's a lot of money, isn't it? That is a lot of money for a consumer.
And that's not even maxed out. Let me max it out just for the sake of the sake.
24 gigs of RAM's going in, 2 terabytes of storage has gone in. Wow. £2,549. So you are well into, I mean, even when you spec it up to what we think is a reasonable level, so 16 gigs of RAM and a terabyte of storage, you're now more than the cost of the M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro, which has 16, or is it 14 GPU cores, I think, in that one. And it's an 8-core, but it's 6 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, and you get a better display, and you get Thunderbolt 4.
This isn't making sense to me.
It doesn't. Let's just check on the RAM situation. So if we go for a 14-inch, the entry level, so yeah, 8-core CPU. So it's an M1 CPU, but it's
an M1 Pro.
It's an M1 Pro. So it's 6 performance cores, 2 efficiency cores. You've got a 14-core GPU, so that will outperform the M2.
Comes with a 67-watt charger.
So you get that.
Although that didn't cost more, to be fair.
You're getting 16 gigs of RAM. You're only getting 512 on the storage, so you're going to have to put the 1 terabyte on for fairness, Pete. So that knocks us up to £2,099. So it's £150 more to have the...
And you get more ports. You get an SD card reader, as many have pointed out in the comments.
HDMI.
No SD card reader. Yeah, that's good. It's bigger.
Thunderbolt 4 support.
That's... so actually,
and an XDR display, mini LED display.
We know a lot of people will go out and buy the M2 because it's the new and the colors, and I suspect it won't be you guys predominantly, because you guys know a lot about what you wouldn't be tuning into this channel otherwise. But there will be a lot of people that will go out and buy that thinking it's better, but it doesn't stack up to me.
No, it doesn't. So I've got a comment there. I can't read the name because my eyesight is Yelan. Can you put that one on?
Yeah, in Sweden. Yeah, well done.
So in Sweden, the base model. Wow, that is expensive, isn't it? And there's another comment further down from Yelan who's saying on that MacBook Pro, if you need RAM, 32 gigs would be €600 more expensive than 24 gigs on the MacBook Air. Yeah, but I think when you get to the M1 Pro, I personally wouldn't spec it with more than 16 gigs of RAM anyway.
No,
I mean that's my recommendation. You'll know if you need more RAM than that, and I don't think
only an idiot would spec 64.
There's a lot of tests that show that you've got to be working it quite hard to really see the difference because the RAM's so fast.
Tyron makes a very good point, I think.
Yeah.
It will get hot, maxed out.
It would. No fan in the MacBook Air.
No.
And they did, interestingly, on the peak performance percentages, because it didn't give us any kind of meaningful data. This is Apple after all. But with the 13-inch MacBook Pro, there was a higher percentage number given for the peak performance.
As Old Finnish Farmer says, more. You get more.
Yeah.
But someone did ask about, does it, I think it's Gergo or Endy. Sorry if I've pronounced it. I've probably made a complete hash of that. Giorgio, I don't know. I'm sorry. Does it have a faster SSD like the Pro? Good question. Apple don't tell us. They don't put that in their specs. So at some point, someone will get their hands on it and do a teardown. In fact, let's face it, all the YouTube channels that Apple likes probably have got one already to tear down and have a look at. Or maybe they haven't.
No, I think that they will get them. I would have thought that we probably would be interested in getting a MacBook Air, one of the base spec ones in, because I suspect we can make use of one of those. So if we do, obviously we'll feature it on the channel.
Can we tear it apart and have a look at the SSD?
No. Someone else will do that for us, Pete, and then we can just comment on it.
There's an interesting comment from McKaylee. I wonder if the Mac Pro will remain Intel.
I had
Goodbye,
wondered.
David, by the way. Thank you for joining us.
I had wondered whether they would release a new Mac Pro but keep the Intel Mac Pro in the lineup, because there are some people who want that still. But who knows? And incidentally, if you want an Intel Mac Pro, the trash cans are actually going for quite cheap now on eBay. You can get yourself a nice used trash can.
Yeah, you can.
Very nice. Good. So the MacBook Air seems to be a difficult one for me, because I feel like it's just a little bit overpriced. If you need those additional features, that's great. Performance-wise, M2 isn't exciting me at this point. I'll wait to see, when we can properly test one, but I'm not expecting it to be night and day difference.
No.
I think it's a very incremental upgrade, and possibly it could have waited, but maybe they brought it forward because they couldn't get the Mac Pro done.
That's a quite sage-like comment. I think you might be right there. It's entirely likely that in the original roadmap, this was all going to be about the Mac Pro, and they had to change it. So they wanted to plug the gap with something.
Yeah. They referred to the 13-inch MacBook Pro as a Pro laptop. I don't personally see that. I mean, the M1 13-inch MacBook Pro replaced the Intel 2-port model.
Yeah.
And they did a 2-port and a 4-port model, but the 4-port model had an additional cooling fan and a better cooling solution, and it ran better and so on and so forth. So it's always been seen to me like it has the Pro name on it, but it's kind of entry level. And with the M1s, actually the MacBook Air with a slight modification to the if you put a heat pad in, can outperform the MacBook Pro.
Really interesting.
Or perform at the same level, I should say. We found with yours, because we got we had an 8 gig one, didn't we? And it got hot.
It did.
And slow.
It did. And no one believed me when we reported it at first. And then loads of others started finding it out. Comment there from Edward Munn. 2013 Mac Pro no longer supports Ventura.
Not really a surprise.
No longer doesn't support Ventura.
I think I saw someone mention earlier as well, the 2014 Mac Mini's also been removed from the support list. So that's pretty rough. The 2013 Mac Pro was still being sold as a current machine in 2019.
Really?
Yeah.
So you bought that 3 years ago and you now can't have the latest OS?
Yeah.
That's going to be some headlines tomorrow, isn't it?
Now, why do you suppose that is?
Because they're focusing more and more on the Apple Silicon architecture. No, that doesn't make any sense.
No, because then the Intel Mac Pro wouldn't work either.
Why do you think it is?
I don't have an idea.
Oh, okay.
It's an interesting subject. So M2 base Air will still be the best-selling notebook. Giorgio, sorry if we're getting that wrong. Camera audio style will be that much better. Probably justifies the price difference. Yeah, and you know that the base model will end up being slightly cheaper as soon as they end up on Amazon. You know, you'll be able to get one for less. I mean, we don't pay £1,000 for the M1 base.
Amazon have it at
$850 or something
like that.
Yeah, so they'll come down in price anyway. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And you know, for what you're getting for the price, the base model still makes sense.
And people want to sit in the coffee shop with the blue one.
They will, no doubt about that.
I know, because I would.
And let's be clear here as well. For the vast majority of people, the MacBook Air is more than enough computer. Plenty of power there.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking through some of these comments here.
So M2 still using the same 5 nanometer process. Expect 10% improvement from M1. Yeah, if that. I think it will be. You'll see it in benchmarks. It's whether you'll see it in real world. I'm just not convinced that you'll see a massive difference in real world, I have to say.
Matthew Turner makes a good comment. The MacBook Pro 13 was already missing Mac OS features due to hardware limitations.
Yeah. I can't see a case for buying an M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch personally, unless it's something you really want and you've got a specific reason for it. I just don't think it makes sense at this point.
No, it's a bit of a... I said this when we were watching it. It feels very long in the tooth and a bit of a white elephant, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, let's face it, there are some professionals out there that really rely on some of the killer features that come with that machine, like the touch bar. So if you need a touch bar, you just got that.
Killer feature. Did anyone like the touch bar? Some people did. Let's talk a little bit about
Edward Munn. Starlight is the color of Matt Bellamy's forehead. That's
is
very,
he the
very,
muse?
yes, that's quite witty, particularly as you look like Matt Bellamy. So,
right, let's talk about macOS Ventura. Evan, thank you very much. DeX mode on iPad. We're going to talk about that in a moment. First of all, let's talk about macOS. I am quite excited about the changes to iPad. Ventura?
I like the start. I actually have to say, Craig was on good form today.
He was very self-deprecating.
Yes, and I like that. He took the mick out of their own marketing department and the fact they needed a big rest after coming up with the names M1 and M2.
But perhaps we could just get Erin's esteemed fashion opinion on
his tracksuit.
It's got to be the tracksuit, Erin.
It was interesting. It was foul. I did not like it. It was not good. I'm gonna be honest. It wasn't great.
Foul.
It was rather foul.
Did you enjoy the slow motion scene where he was just kind of running in slow motion to the camera?
Truly a highlight. Truly a highlight.
Yeah, I thought you might.
I thought his tracksuit was sponsored by Spectrum. Do you remember the ZX Spectrum?
The ZX Spectrum.
That was great.
Yeah, very good.
So, yeah.
G Photo, late to your feed. Sorry. What's your view on Mac Air M2 versus M1 and the reduced price? Well, we have just
scroll back.
Yeah,
scroll back, and you'll get the answers you seek.
Yeah, we'll review again towards the end of the show. So
Ventura is the new system, and I think it's ace.
No, someone's already beaten you to that joke. Halvard, come on, let's have Halvard's comment on. Well done. Will Apple Genius staff be called Ace Venturas?
I didn't even see that comment. So, Halvard, you and I are on the exact same wavelength, which is disturbing for one of us.
That is
probably
worrying.
For you.
Yeah. It's not a good place to be.
So let's say,
Pete, I just got to say, usually when we do a podcast, so Pete and I, most weeks, but not every week, tend to do a podcast where we'll sit and talk for an hour about various topics.
Get a bit silly.
Yeah, generally give Erin some stick. And you usually do a joke.
Yes.
Don't you? And we haven't had a joke yet tonight.
No. Well, no one wants one. No one wants one on the main channel.
I thought you prepared some humor for us, Pete.
No, I had some updates for you because I've been on holiday for a few weeks. So this is my first podcast back. So I got a few updates on life for you, but no jokes.
Okay.
So the job I went for at the suntan lotion factory.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't get it anyway. But they always said I could reapply.
There we go. Now, if you like jokes of that standard and worse, then tune into the Constant Geekery podcast on an almost weekly basis.
Don't be unkind, though, because one of my friends died the other day. And I'm a bit sad about it.
Mm.
He fell into a vat of coffee. But don't worry, he didn't suffer. It was instant.
Very good. Very good.
Hey,
okay,
excellent.
thank you very much. Is a Mac relevant in the gaming industry? Yes, it is. And we'll come back to that.
We keep saying we're coming back
Yeah,
to things.
we got a lot of
we do
things.
come back to things, but it is in our notes. So
It is in our notes. So what I was trying to say about the podcast is that some people who watch the main channel don't know that we do a podcast because it's on its own channel.
and it's got Erin in it. Erin, show
Erin.
your face again with that thing you do.
It's got
where
me
you
in
do-
it.
Yeah.
It's
And
amazing.
she has some really incisive comments to make on technology, doesn't she?
Always.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, you can find that. It's if you just search the Constant Geekery podcast on YouTube, you'll find us. We're also on Spotify and iTunes and
All your favorite streaming platforms,
Basically.
as they say.
does iTunes actually exist? Whatever.
Apple.
So
Apple
Ventura,
thingies.
some of the new features, improved Spotlight, great. What about Stage Manager?
Well, I like the fact that they said that on a computer, Windows is a problem. That's what I put in my notes anyway. I should write Apple scripts. Yeah, I thought this was good. I do tend to be one of those people that sometimes get to the point where I've got lots of applications open, and it's like I've got to find the right one. And I do think that Windows traditionally always did a better job of that with how it did things on the taskbar. So this is a welcome improvement, I would say.
But we already have quite a few ways of working with different windows. You know, you've got your command tab to work through your windows. You've got expose. You can minimize stuff into the dock. You can hide apps and bring them back.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was a bit odd to then introduce yet another way of working with Windows, but actually, I suppose choice is a good thing.
Yes.
Because everybody works in a different way, and
Yeah.
you know, Stage Manager might work really well for some people, but of course, I think maybe it was more to do with iPad OS.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And there it is on the Mac. Some new features in Mail,
Yes.
which I thought were quite
Very welcome.
So the undo send thing.
How many
Now-
times have you sent them an email and then instantly regretted it?
I'll tell you a little story.
Okay, go on.
We had years ago. We were doing some marketing for a firm of lawyers. It was a big contract that we'd got. We were doing their digital marketing, getting them leads for ambulance chasing, basically. And they had this policy. They were paying a lot. You know, we were doing Google AdWords, and it was an expensive kind of activity. So they're paying a lot for these leads, but they were coming in, and what they would do is wait until the end of the day to phone them.
What?
Yeah. Which you just don't do. You've got to jump on these things straight away. People are shopping around online. If you don't call them straight away, you're going to lose that sale. So understandably, then they weren't getting much from their campaign. And, you know, they asked us to come in for a meeting, and they sent this email around. I hit reply all and basically put, what a bunch of numpties, can't believe they're so wasteful with their leads.
So loads of leads,
Yeah.
and they just weren't jumping on them.
No.
So they weren't getting the value because they weren't following up quickly enough.
Yeah, the problem was that I put my thoughts on that in an email and then hit send. And as soon as I hit send, you know, when you just kind of, the blood drains from your face and stuff, I knew what I'd done, and it's too late.
Yep.
You can't get it back. Unsurprisingly, we got fired, and you know, that cost the company a lot of money, tens of thousands of pounds.
That's a brave admission to make in the public.
Well, you know, we all make mistakes, and
We all do.
you know, I think it was a little bit harsh, really, because what I said was true, and they should have maybe taken it on the chin. But there we go.
Yeah.
The thing about sending emails and then cancelling them is that you're very reliant on the email server, and there is no unified standard for cancelling an email.
No, and I did wonder about this, how they're doing it, whether they are relying on the mail server or whether they are
Delaying.
because they said if it's within a few moments, I think, or words to that effect, then you can recall it. So I wonder if it's actually just it's sitting there in the background for a minute or something.
I don't think they would do that, because I think what they would probably do is they'll look at where the network traffic is going on your computer. They know when your computer's trying to connect to a mail server, for example, from their mail app, and they'll redirect you to an Apple mail server and ping it over there, where it'll be held for a moment before it gets sent.
Okay.
I think maybe that's how they'll do it. But
Interesting.
if you've got a better idea, folks, say might be useful. Who knows?
Schedule send, that's quite good, because sometimes I use that quite a lot, because sometimes you want to reply to, say, a client or someone, but you don't want to elicit an immediate reply. You don't want to give the impression perhaps that you're working in the middle of the night or what have you. For various reasons, you want it to go later. So a scheduled send is quite good.
Yeah. Excellent. And we've got Safari, lots of stuff about Safari shared tab groups. I thought that was possibly quite interesting. So grouping tabs together and sharing them with somebody.
Yep.
That could be quite useful. Passkeys. Now this is a big thing.
Yes, let's talk about that.
So replacing passwords, and this is one of a couple of the technologies. I think there were 3 different things where Apple said they were working to create open industry standards.
Yes.
So there were things in the wallet announcements for iOS and that sort of thing. And passkeys was one of them. So they are working with Microsoft and Google to make sure these things can work on all platforms.
Yeah. So the principle of it is that rather than just relying on a password or even an auto-created password, it's actually using biometric data either from Touch or ID or Face ID to create essentially a unique signature that is your password or your passkey. That can't be used on other websites. It will only work with that website. So it can't be phished. It can't be leaked because it's kept on your device.
So more
and
secure.
It will only work. So that's a really good thing.
I think that's good for many people. I think that's good. I noticed a comment fly up about the email thing from Aryan down the bottom.
The SMTP reset.
Yeah. So there is an SMTP command reset. This command is sent to a server when the mail transaction needs to be aborted. The problem with that is that the time it takes for the mail to be sent to the server and then pinged on in some cases is, very, very short space of time. So getting the command over to the server in time, very difficult. They need a delay function. What I've also found, and you may be far more experienced in this than me, but in my experience of setting up mail servers and using different software packages and other things to manage mail servers and build Linux mail servers, is that they all behave, they don't all behave consistently.
No.
In the way that they work. So a lot of people think that email is a guaranteed medium of sending messages, and it just absolutely isn't. And it's archaic, actually. Archaic, the way that it works. It could be so much better. And I would love to see that getting tackled by the big tech companies.
Yeah.
Because they could get rid of spam.
They could. It's an old technology, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting comment here, or question, which I think opens up a bigger G-Photos comment, Erin, on passkeys. What's that going to do for password managers such as 1Password? I think there's a bigger observation I've made today. It's a really good comment. There's a lot of things in these releases on iOS 16 and other things that are going to kill some third-party apps. I can't remember what they were off the top of my head, but I was thinking as we went along, there was something that just isn't. You're not. Well,
that's been the Apple way, though, isn't it? They look at what other people are doing, and then they make it better.
Which is really good. I also have a note.
It's not good
here.
If you're one of the people that are making the other things.
No, it sucks, but integration is better. I mean, let's face it. Do you lament the fact that you no longer have a Torch app that is built into your phone?
I don't, but I imagine the people that made all the Torch apps are probably quite unhappy.
I do feel for them. And Randy's Donuts. That's all I need to just say. There were a couple of other things as well that are going to signal a problem for application developers who've built those type of things.
I noticed a couple of comments about Safari. Apple wax lyrical about how great it is. Our web developers don't always agree with them. I think from a user perspective, I prefer Safari. Safari's never taken all my memory from me. like some other browsers I can mention. Let's talk about gaming. Let's talk about gaming. So we've got Metal 3, which is using Metal FX Upscaling. So we spoke about this earlier. So you render at a lower resolution, then use machine learning to scale it up and make it.
The way I illustrated that,
Yeah.
a bit like Debbie McGee to your Paul Daniels.
A lot of people won't get that reference.
But those that do will.
And I don't want to be Paul Daniels.
I don't want to be Debbie McGee.
Right. You don't look like Debbie McGee.
I'm going to take that as a, yeah.
I think we should highlight Start Select's latest comment, Erin. Just, I'm not going to read it out, but let's just get that up on the screen. Yeah, there we go. They showed No Man's Sky, my favorite game. I spend a lot of time playing No Man's Sky on my Steam Deck now.
Do you? You got one, have you?
I have.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And
it's a good game.
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic game. Now, Apple showed this in action.
What did you think of it?
I thought it looked all right. I mean, it doesn't look as good as it does on my PC.
It looked all right.
I wasn't blown away, but then that could be YouTube quality or the stream quality.
Or it could be the fact that, I mean, No Man's Sky first came out in 2016, I think you'll find. And it is a great game. My sons play it on their gaming PC, but it is 6 years old, so it's a game that's been ported, I'm guessing, in some form or other. What I thought was more exciting, although I look forward to playing No Man's Sky on the Mac.
Well, I will say, just hold that thought. I'm pretty sure that Apple paid Hello Games to port it, to build it with Metal 3. So I don't think it's just a port.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is, there's obviously maybe some legacy. They're not going to do it from scratch, I wouldn't have thought. Although Hello Games are they're the sort of company that probably would do, well, we're going to do this from scratch because that's the right thing to do.
You'd have to certainly make some changes because of tile-based deferred rendering, but let's move on.
That's what I was thinking about, was tile-based deferred rendering. What I was going to say is they did a demo of Resident Evil Village, which is coming to Mac. And that was when I think the Capcom guy who came on, I think he was from, where was he from, Erin?
Maybe Japan, perhaps.
Maybe from Japan.
Was he not French?
No idea.
You seem to confuse those two.
Don't speak.
Anyway, very grim game, not the sort of thing I would play, but it did look impressive. And they were quoting that it will run at 1080p on the MacBook Air. I'm guessing that's the M2 MacBook Air, and 4K on the Mac Studio. And he said their developers are impressed. They're blown away by what they can achieve with this architecture. And the fact that they had someone from Capcom.
You see, that's the real thing. It's not so much the games and what they look like or anything else.
But it did look good.
Yeah, I mean, it looks. Metal is a good framework. The big issue with bringing gaming to Mac is not that the machines can't handle the games, or it's getting developers to develop for a platform where they may not have a large customer base. So the significant thing here is to get a senior member of Capcom's team inside Apple's building, as part of their keynote.
Definitely.
What that shows you is that Apple is interested in gaming, and they're investing and they're making contact with these, with development studios. No Man's Sky coming to Mac. That's a big thing. And actually, I have done some gaming on my Mac here.
Have you?
Yeah.
Chess, because that comes with chess.
I've played Timberborn on it and a few other games, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Bit of Farming Simulator.
I haven't played Farming Simulator. No, because I live in the countryside and I don't need to simulate.
You don't need to simulate. Yeah, I thought the Capcom appearance, the guy from Capcom, his name escapes me. Can you remember it, Erin?
No.
Was a bit of a pole in the ground, a bit of a signal of intent. I think we've always said no, Apple's not interested in AAA gaming, but I'm sensing a shift.
Yeah. Good. Well, let's talk about this iPhone as a webcam. Now, quick poll in the comments section. So, would you balance your expensive iPhone on the back of your expensive MacBook using what is what is almost certainly going to be a very expensive stand, magnetic accessories? Just let us know in the comments there whether you would be happy to do that.
I think this is a good
Start
idea.
Select says yes. G Photo no in capital letters.
Okay, so we're 50%.
What about
Either
you,
way,
Pete?
I would. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I would.
I'm thinking no. I think it just
It looks weird.
it's like they're saying we put a great new camera in your Mac, but if you want a really good camera in your Mac, bolt an iPhone to it.
Yeah, but come on, be realistic. We often agree, but I'm going to disagree with you on this. Look how thin that is. Okay, compared to how thick a phone is.
Yeah, fair.
And you got lens things and stuff going on. It makes a lot of sense. And this has actually reminded me, this is the other set of app developers who are going to sadly lose out. It's because there are apps out there that will turn your phone into a webcam. They don't work particularly well, but well enough that people buy them. And that completely destroys it because it does it without you having to wake up your phone. It does center stage. It does portrait mode. It does studio light.
And let me come back to that in a minute. Let's just take some of the comments. So it seems no. Tyrone says no. Matthew Turner, no. MacBook camera should be good enough. I agree. Deepak, never. Old Finnish Farmer, no way. Too expensive. Yeah, that is one expensive webcam.
Yeah, but you're not buying it because it's a webcam. You say, "Oh, I'll get myself an iPhone and use it as a webcam." If you happen to have a MacBook Air, a MacBook, and I happen to have an iPhone, and what I really want to do is spend £150 on a Belkin bracket.
You know when we're video conferencing?
Yes.
And Erin's on the video conference.
Yes.
And then you want to use your phone to text me insults about Erin and what she's saying.
Yes.
Right. So how are you going to be able to do that if your phone is on top of the
WhatsApp desktop application? And with all the collaborative features,
the phone looks down, doesn't it? At your desk, you'll be able to see you typing.
Yeah, but she can't even speak Japanese. So what chance has she got with English?
I don't. Hang on.
And with all this collaborative features, I'm sure there'll be ways to insult her within the FaceTime stream.
I believe so. Look, Cheer says +1 already using iPhone 8 as a webcam. Erin's got an iPhone 8.
Do I?
Don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
There we go.
Yes, I do.
It's absolutely battered.
She's a beaut.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't show your notifications to everyone.
It wasn't
see what you've been watching on Crunchy Biscuit or whatever it was.
Crunchy Roll.
Old Finnish Farmer says that clip must cost $99. At least $99, I would imagine.
What's a boller?
I don't know.
Is that a bit like a ploller?
It's a unit of currency. Apple will make a lot of money. I think you commented at the time that the investment in making it work will be paid back in the first 24 hours of selling.
The software development involved in making it work will be paid back in the royalties that Apple get paid by Belkin for the bracket. I think actually when you say mount sounds okay, doesn't it? I've got a mount for my phone, but a bracket makes it sound like there's screws things involved. I
don't know. Look, it's a useful feature to have. We're mocking it, of course, because it's our live show. And we like to have a bit of banter.
I put it to you for certain presentations where you want the highest of quality. And there are times when on a video conference, you've done it, I've done it with clients and other activities, you want the best possible quality. The camera on this is good. I'm not knocking that. It's a massive improvement, but this is a step up again. And I don't think that should be snorted at.
Have you noticed, though, on a slight side point, the MacBook Pro camera softens your face and there's no setting where you can turn that off?
I've got a soft face. Some people say it looks like melting ice cream.
Oh, it's the stuff horror movies are made of. Let's move on.
Okay.
Let's move on. Can we talk about iPad OS?
Yes, we can, but I'd just like to talk about Apple CarPlay just for a minute.
Okay.
Because I'd like to know, what did you guys think of the sneak peek of Apple CarPlay that will be available sometime in the distant future?
End of 2023.
Q4. Deepak Murthy says Steve Jobs would be turning in the grave. He frequently does these days, I've heard.
Yeah. I didn't like the new Apple CarPlay. It doesn't look that good. I didn't like any of the designs, particularly for the gauges, the driver instrumentation view.
Clever though, isn't it? Integrating all your car's hardware with one unified UI.
Yes, it is.
Particularly as you can customize it.
It is clever, but isn't part of the fun of getting a new car learning the new system? Whereas if you get in your new car and it's the same as the old car,
I put to you, yes, but only for geeks. So we are geeks. Some of you probably are geeks, but for the vast majority of people, I'm thinking of a normal person like my wife. She wants to get in a car and she doesn't want to fight with it. She doesn't want to learn. Golf GT the other day, she went to press something on Google Maps, which is using Apple CarPlay, and the sensor down below for the volume detected her hand and brought up the collision detection system, and it completely flipped her out. She didn't know what was going on. So you have to learn that all the time for new cars, whereas this eliminates that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's just another thing that will crash from time to time, and you'll have to turn it off and on again. It's like if what happens, right? If you don't have your iPhone connected, so you've bought your car, you've got your iPhone. Suppose, right, then you decide, I'm going to change to an Android phone.
Well, then you have to learn your car's native interface.
So why not just learn the car's native interface and be free to have whatever phone you want? I'm putting the other argument over, and I thought that the gauges and whatnot looked a little bit Fisher Price. It did look like my first car.
I liked it.
If Tommy did a driver's display, that's what it would look like. So Apple need to up their game, definitely. And
that's a very good point, Judge. I'm really sorry, I can't pronounce your name, Jojo. I hope I haven't completely slaughtered it. Imagine that you use a rental car and you don't have to learn how it works every time when you get a new one. That is a really good point. That is a really good point.
Do you know, I sat at Glasgow Airport once after renting a car, and they gave me a Mercedes, an E-Class, and I sat there and you got the command thing and all of this other stuff, and I couldn't find the gear. I was on Google.
Did you find the handbrake?
No, that was okay. Everything. I just could not find the gear. Where was the gear selector? And it was on the.
Yes.
Americans would be laughing at me, but it was on the steering column. But I sat there for about half an hour, and I was thinking I would have to go back in and ask and look stupid. But in true British fashion, I didn't go in and look stupid. I stayed there and sweated it out.
4 hours later, that was the day the customer said, "Where's Dave?"
It's so stupid. I went about 4 miles in that car. Ridiculous. Anyway.
So anyway, CarPlay, that's enough about that. Should we move on to iPad OS?
Yeah, because they called this, and I quote, a big release, which is an interesting. I'm not convinced it was such a big release, but
I put to you it's the first time iPad has had its own native weather app.
Wow, that is big. That is big.
With animations.
With animations, so yeah, rush out and buy your iPad. I, of course, want to know if my investment in the M1 iPad Pro with 16 gigs of RAM was worth doing. Because last year, of course, that got released, and then iPad OS, we got widgets. Remember that last year? Widgets. That was good. So what are the features that we get? There's some collaboration stuff, isn't there? And they announced this as part of iPad OS, but actually it's going to be available in iOS and macOS as well. So what did you think about collaboration stuff? Any better than Office 365, which is what we use?
Well, because you had collaboration and they had something called Freeform. And I think it was all good. And no doubt it will work really well because it's Apple and they do tend to engineer these things very well. But we use Office 365 and SharePoint in our business. And it's not always perfect. Teams does have its glitches, but everything does. What's good about it, though, is it's completely device agnostic. So you got someone on a Windows laptop, on an iPad, on a phone, on a Mac, Apple Mac. It just doesn't matter. You can do all those collaboration things really well already, and we use them.
Yeah.
So
let's just
exactly, Chris Ware. Freeform is basically OneNote with Apple bells and whistles. Good. Well, that's basically what we said.
Yeah, you can do it all in OneNote. I guess what I would say about that, I want to come to Anna's comments. If you could put those up, please, Aaron. But what I would say about it is that we pay quite a lot of money for Office 365, and we also own a load of Macs. So
We do.
we
I'm
could
thinking
save a huge amount of money, perhaps, by moving.
we could potentially. I don't think that's the right move for us, but that's for other reasons. But I'm thinking more broadly in organizations that have more of a mixture, which is not uncommon. Anna, nice to have you with us.
Yes. Now, I know, Anna, that you are also a little bit disappointed with the M1 iPad Pro. I feel we get that from your comments. So Apple have denigrated iPadOS to the highest degree. That was not worth the wait. Yeah, I sort of agree, and I sort of almost don't in some ways. But let's have the next comment up. There's really no need now to get an iPad Pro or Air with the M1. I wouldn't rush out to upgrade an existing iPad. So if you've got the iPad Pro with the A12 in, or the previous iPad Air, I wouldn't be in a mad rush to go and get an M1 iPad, because
not with the gorgeous screen that they've got with that no shadowing. That's
in the real world, there's not a lot of difference. Is that going to change? Anna's third question, based on iPadOS, can you justify keeping your iPad Pro? I will keep it because I use it. And I think it's also important to say as well that if you're buying an iPad fresh, having an M1 in it isn't a bad thing, particularly if you like to do anything graphical, because that is the one area where you do see the benefit of the M1 chip in the graphics performance.
interesting.
But here
So
are the
good for illustrators and things like that.
well, you could still illustrate on the other one. I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, what would be useful is to have proper stuff under the hood that is enabling developers to create software. So Apple started talking about desktop class apps.
Yes, we got excited at that point, didn't we? Because we thought that might be leading to some of your comments are asking about Final Cut Pro and things like that.
Yeah, well, that really didn't happen. Let me come back to that in a moment. Features for M1.
Could I just, before the comment disappears, could you just bring up the comment second from the top there, please, Erin? From a Mr. Mike Murphy. I don't know who that is. Just to let you know, Erin also speaks fluent Romanian.
That's interesting.
Do you want to give us
regale us with some Romanian?
Of course. Guten Tag, ich heiße Erin. Ich wohne
That's
in einer
German.
kleinen Stadt. No, definitely Romanian. Definitely Romanian.
That's German. It wasn't even good German.
Definitely
Oh,
Romanian.
thanks for wasting time.
Anytime.
Ridiculous. Can I finish answering the question anyway?
Yes, sorry.
So we've got virtual memory swapping. So enhancements to that is going to make a difference. Display scaling. That's interesting. I like that.
I was quite excited about that.
Make more use of all of those pixels that you've got on the screen.
And does that only work if you've got an M1 iPad?
I don't know. They did say features for M1. And then they started talking about Stage Manager, but I'm not convinced that was M1 only. I think that's just part of the new iPadOS. The rewrite of the file system and various other things. There's a lot of stuff under the hood that's maybe improved, and some better APIs for developers. But the fact that Apple are not releasing a Pro app at this point in time would possibly suggest that we've still got a journey before that becomes relevant. So in a long-winded answer to your question, Anna, I suspect that the M1 iPad Pro will become relevant at probably the point where I'm due for an upgrade.
Probably.
So yeah, I really do regret buying the top of the line model. Pete regrets it as well because he paid for half of it.
Another comment I'd like to bring up now you've answered your question is the one there from McKaylee. The star of the channel is Erin.
Which channel are you watching?
Yeah, and I would say yes, she is the star in the same way that Sloth is the star of the Goonies. Erin is running Language OS with a few bugs. Yeah. That was actually quite a clever thing. I know Google's already doing it, but being able to take video and translate it and images and translate it from the camera, that's very useful. I wanted to do that a couple of weeks ago when I was away. Google does already do it in their app.
I was kind of thinking I did that many years ago with my phone using Google's apps.
Yeah, but you have to go into the app, whereas they've now embedded it into the camera. So you can do it in real time, which is quite good. Going back to the display scaling is quite useful.
So somebody said that is an M1 specific thing. And someone else, Start Select is saying Stage Manager is M1 only as well. Interesting.
Okay.
I don't understand that because there's surely enough juice, or maybe it's RAM, shortage of RAM in the other models. Okay.
Erin is better than Pete and other guy.
Other guy.
I love the fact that this is your channel. I'm your sidekick in this arrangement, and you're the other guy.
How many videos have I made?
Unless they think you're Erin and she's the other guy.
That's harsh. Anna says, Anna is Romanian. There you go. Thank you in Romanian is
Mulțumesc.
Go on, can you do that? I'm not going to try that.
Mulțumesc.
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 No, there's a Z in there.
Mulțumesc.
Mulțumesc.
We are just butchering things this evening.
Right, Stage Manager on iPad. Come on, let's get back to that.
Right, due to memory, as other iPads jettison apps instead of having to. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
that's true.
So
that is one small benefit that you do see with an M1 iPad, in that apps will come back to life very quickly.
It might make an interesting video actually to once you've got the beta of this, is to actually report back on if someone's like me, for example. I'm quite happy with my iPad Pro, but I'm technically due for an upgrade. I've not done it because I just don't see any benefit. Is it enough to justify it? That will be an interesting video to make.
Well, yeah, who knows? We need to give it a try. Certainly looks better for multitasking. Whereas Stage Manager, I don't really understand it on Mac OS. Makes a lot of sense on iPad OS. And I love the fact you can have overlapping windows, you can resize windows, but it's still not Samsung's DeX. You know, it's not quite at that level.
I've not used that, but you've got a Samsung tablet, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, DeX is really smart. It is very, very good. If the apps support it, and I wonder whether that will also be a problem here. You know, the apps will need to support it. You can resize windows if the app supports it, and the external display is not mirrored.
Yay! So you can actually have a second display for your iPad
at a proper resolution. So at the moment, if you plug your iPad into a TV, which of course is a 16:9 aspect ratio, it will change the resolution on or the aspect ratio on your iPad. But now that won't happen anymore, perhaps, if you're using Stage Manager. I don't know if that's a system-wide thing, but that really does open up possibilities for Pro apps and other things if you want to use your iPad for that. And I do want to use my iPad for that kind of stuff.
Good. So that makes you happy?
Well, it will when the apps arrive. It's all very well putting the stuff in iPad OS, but of course, you know, they're doing it now. They're announcing it now. They're releasing it for developers now, so that...
Get on with it, developers.
Yeah.
Make Dave happy, because a happy Dave means a happy everyone who works with him.
I don't think it does, though, does it? Does it, Erin? Does it make any difference if I'm happy? Does that make you any less miserable at work?
Not really.
No, I didn't think so. Okay.
So J2 Simpson makes an interesting comment here. I think one of the keys is iPad is not the same experience as a laptop. How you bring a full-featured computing experience to a tablet sensibly is an open question. Well, because I think Start Select wanted to see someone using an iPad in tablet, laptop, and desktop modes, and I think you ask good questions, and there's a good point there that how do you bring a fully featured computing experience to a tablet is an open question. I understand where you're coming from that, but I think some of you might think I'm committing heresy by saying this, but I think Microsoft answered that question quite a few years ago with the Surface, with its dock, because we used them, didn't we? And if there was just a bit more power in them and they were more Apple-esque, being able to slot, you had a Surface which worked in tablet mode, you had a little pop-out keyboard with a trackpad on it, and then you could slot it into a dock, it would power up to big multiple screens if you wanted to, and boom, you had a full desktop computer. The only problem with it was a little bit underpowered. If Apple could do something like that with the iPad that was the Surface 4 or 5 years ago, I think a lot of people would adopt that.
A lot of people would like to have a Surface-style iPad or an Apple tablet that ran Mac OS. But Mac OS just doesn't have the features that you need for a touch interface thing, whereas Windows has been developed with that. So I feel like it's not going to happen in the same way. If you compare those three, though, so I mean, we've yet to really try the new Apple system out. So obviously, we'll do that. Samsung's DeX is good. It's not as good as having a Windows tablet, as I recall. The Surface tablet did work as a tablet pretty well. It worked as a computer pretty well, and it was running full Windows applications, which made it really useful and versatile. Android apps are not really quite the same. And I don't think Apple are going to go down that road either. So I think if you're desperate for a device like that, then I think the answer will come from Microsoft. And I've said this before on the channel, but I'm quite interested in what Qualcomm are doing with Nuvia. They bought Nuvia, which is ex-Apple and Google engineers who are making their version, their own silicon. And this is we're not talking about a Snapdragon chip, like Qualcomm are usually making. We're talking about a completely new ground up ARM-based chip to take on Apple Silicon. And Qualcomm has already said they're hoping to bring that next year, 2023. I'm fairly certain that Microsoft and Qualcomm will be working together to produce something like that. Surface Pro X at the moment is an ARM-based system, so I think they'll improve ARM-based Windows, and they'll have a contender. So if somebody wants a low power consumption but performant tablet / laptop, there will be an option.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
That's okay. Apple Surfaces sounds really good, says Jiri. Yeah. Daisy in the Rain is disappointed that there is no Apple toaster again. Oh, yeah.
Why would you want to toast an apple?
Oh, Pete, really? Let's do a little bit of a review then of what we saw. I mean, we haven't really spoken about the features in iOS 16. Phones and stuff is not really what the channel is about. We're more computing tech. Likewise, Apple Watch. I wasn't overly excited by anything. I can see the benefit though of things like the afibrillation and detection and other things.
Yes.
real health benefits for people who need it. My issue with Apple Watch is that they're selling it as a watch, and it's not really a watch, is it?
Well, no, it's a wearable computing device.
It's like your phone isn't really a phone, is it? It's your camera. It's a portable music player. It's lots of different things. We call it a phone, but I like to wear a traditional watch, and I saved up my money to buy a nice watch.
Pennies.
Saved me pennies to buy a nice watch, and a lot of people do that. They set that as a bit of a, when they get to a certain point in their life, they've saved up some money and they want to buy themselves a watch or a piece of jewelry.
To a certain age.
Yeah, you would know. You're there.
Yeah, I've got Big Ben on my hand.
And Apple Watch is not something to aspire to like that. So what do you aspire to instead? I'm not. I don't know that I could wear a gold chain or anything like that. I don't think I'd be. That's quite the right look for me. I don't know, Erin. You're of the fashion persuasion.
MC Hers.
Could I rock a gold chain? Do you think?
No.
And some large signet rings, that kind of thing.
No.
Do you know? I've just had a thought.
I
just want to. Steady on.
Overdo it.
Steady on. Yeah. Going back to the toaster, Daisy in the Rain. There was an announcement that kind of probably most people haven't thought. Oh, so what? Apple are working with others to bring about a unified smart internet of things home app devices thing called Matter. That was announced, and they've donated essentially, or I'm sure they haven't donated, but HomeKit is part of that. So I'm guessing that when Matter becomes a standard, all your existing HomeKit devices will work. So where I'm going with this is, if it hasn't happened already, and it may well have done, if there is such a thing as a smart toaster, you may indeed get your Apple toaster, Daisy. So you can say, Siri, make me some toast. And as long as you've got bread in it, it will.
Do you remember the toaster in Red Dwarf?
No.
Some people will get that reference. Very amusing.
So, yeah, that was interesting.
Anyway, the Apple Watch, it's a wrist-top computer is what it is. And I think it would be kind of cool if, because when I do wear mine, I tend to wear it on in addition to my watch, and I don't use it for telling the time.
you do look like an 80s pop star when you've got multiple. Do you remember you used to wear multiple swatches? That was the fashion.
I never did that.
Well, I didn't, but
I was just a wee lad in the 80s.
yeah,
Unlike you.
Randy's Donuts.
You've I've got the poop emoji icon next to the word tracking under Apple Watch.
Well, you did make a comment that, you know, Apple Watch is tracking everything: your fitness, your heart rate, your
a log
blood
for your
gas,
logs.
your drugs. Taking what drugs have you had? How many strokes you've had in a day? So why not have a poo tracker? You know, just every time you're like, it detects the straining.
Let's move on. Can we have Jeroen Jansen's comment up, please, Erin? Is there a calculator app coming to iPad 2? No.
It's too complicated.
Someone actually, I'm sure it was Craig Federici that they interviewed, and he said they'd never done it because they built
one.
They felt that they needed to do something different on the iPad, and it needed to be something special, but it's a calculator. And they haven't come up with what that thing is yet that makes it special, so they haven't done it. So there we go.
Mike Newmeyer, Apple knows when you masticate.
Yeah. Sleep features. Apple runners talking about running and sleep features in WatchOS are really important to me. Great updates. Good. Excellent. I used to track my sleep when I was having trouble sleeping using a Fitbit. And do you remember it burned my skin?
I do.
Because I was wearing it all the time.
I do. That was quite funny.
Yeah. Actually,
caused you a lot of pain, didn't it?
It wasn't.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
It didn't cause a lot of pain. It was just ugly.
I don't think that was the burn. Interesting comment from Chris Weller about Matter. Apple have had Matter for a few years, and it's only now that named brands are starting to adopt it. Reminds me of the XKCD on competing standards. Any thoughts on that? Thank you, Chris. I didn't know that. So,
well, I suppose it takes time, doesn't it, to get traction with brands and get them on board. But I saw lots of brands I recognised on it, so it was good. Same with the Apple CarPlay thing as well. Actually, there was quite a few, but notable missing.
Yeah,
you said BMW.
BMW weren't there. Tesla not there.
Right now, can we come back to
the stats?
The stats. They said 79% of Americans buying a new car wouldn't buy the car unless it had Apple CarPlay.
And that feels.
I don't believe that. Yeah, I don't. Where are they getting that from? And I thought Tesla was a huge proportion of new cars.
Exactly, and that doesn't support Apple CarPlay. Something doesn't stack up. Where are they getting those figures from?
Yeah. Start Select is saying BMW being absent is interesting because they supported the car keys in Apple Wallet 2 years ago. Is there any other brands that are doing that?
I don't know. I was surprised to see BMW missing, unless it may be that they only put up a selection of.
That's entirely possible.
There was actually talking about car keys. I thought it was a great little soundbite in Wallet where Craig Federici was saying that Apple been working hard to empty your physical wallet. Sorry, replace your physical wallet. And I think they're doing great with that. One thing I did think was quite interesting here, and for those of you that are developers, the in-app verification for proving age. Now, they showed it so that, if you're going into, I don't know, a nightclub or somewhere where you need to prove you're over a certain age, you can show it and it will do that. But they also talked about it having an API so that if you need to prove who you are for some kind of process online or something like that, you can tap into it and use that data in your phone. That's potentially quite huge because there's a growing need for, you think about online applications for passports, driving licenses, all sorts of other things in a more data secure world. Having something like that developers can tap into to verify who people are for things like credit applications and things like that could be huge.
Could be huge, but will it be available outside of the US?
I could see it being available in, the four big markets that they normally roll these things out in are the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. So I could see it being in.
But we haven't had the Apple Card. the credit card. So I don't think we're going to get Apple Pay later. The tap to pay thing, that's US only as far as I'm aware. So all of those things, if you're in the States, great. If you're outside,
Maybe
not so
not.
much. I feel like we should just kind of review the main things and bring proceedings towards a conclusion. Of course, we had the new MacBook Air, the M2 announcement. A surprise, perhaps not so much a surprise. I don't know. Were you surprised?
What with the M2? It's difficult to answer that because I've deliberately, because I've been away on holiday, I've been able to switch off completely from it. So I came into this quite, apart from expecting a Mac Pro announcement, I was fairly ambivalent as to what we get. So I know you were surprised.
Yeah, I thought Apple might hold off on M2. I thought they might make M2, later in the year, but there we go. Doesn't matter. They've done it now. That's great. The MacBook Air, I like the new design because it looks like these
nice.
MacBook Pros, and I like it. I'm not a fan of the notch.
You're not a fan of it.
There we go. But I can live with it. I do think it's a rubbish design choice, but it is what it is. And I think it's one small downside against so many major upsides of using these machines.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm happy to live with it. I think anyone buying the MacBook Air will likewise probably get used to it pretty quickly. You can always, by the way, folks, just switch it off. You can black the top of the screen. There's an option within macOS to do that, or you can get an app to do it one way or the other.
Didn't know you could do that.
Yeah. So you can just have a big black space at the top of your screen. And because, although, now I'm saying that works really well on these laptops because they have mini LED displays. So the blacks are black. But the MacBook Air is not a mini LED display, so that might not work.
Oh.
Bear that in mind.
Right.
Folks.
How do I turn this notch off then?
We'll look at that later.
Okay. I'm excited.
So you can work around it anyway. I think most people will get used to it. The pricing of the MacBook Air M2 versus the M1, it's obvious why Apple is doing that. They make so many of those M1 MacBook Airs, they need to carry on selling them.
Yeah.
How long will they keep selling them for?
Until they stop selling them. As soon as they start seeing the data going, well, no, what I mean by that is as soon as they start seeing the data going down that people aren't buying those anymore, then they'll stop selling them. Well, they'll have some formula for working out when it's economically not viable.
Yeah, and what they do is they ship them all out to the resellers. So Amazon will get a load in, and other big Apple retailers will have them in, and they will be cheaper. So I actually think there's possibilities of M1 bargains on the horizon with the MacBook Air, and it's still a great looking notebook.
Yeah,
and it is a great machine. Nothing wrong with that machine. Is it worth the extra £250 in our case to go to the M2 MacBook Air? We weren't sure about that. Will it still sell well? Yes, it will. Will you have to pay £1,249 for it? Probably not.
No. Go on Amazon, get yourself a bargain.
Yeah, the only thing just to watch with that, though, of course, is if you buy especially in the UK, if you buy it from Amazon and you have any problems with it, and you take it to the Apple Store, they'll tell you to talk to Amazon.
Naff off is the term we often use in the UK.
So sometimes worth considering doing Apple Care, and which you can now do on an annual payment thing. It is the way to think of it is as an insurance product, because that's what it is.
That's exactly what it is. We did a podcast on that, I think.
We did. And I think actually it's pretty sensible for your expensive purchase, and it means that you get all of those things. And of course, you can put it on in fact, you could buy a MacBook Air, M1 MacBook Air from Amazon, and put Apple Care on it
for the price of buying it from Apple
without Apple Care.
Yes.
There you go.
There's your top tip.
Should you buy the M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch with Touch Bar? I'm struggling to find any compelling arguments for that one.
Hard.
And really disappointing to see USB 4, not Thunderbolt 4, on the M2 chip, which would indicate they're using a similar controller to the M1, which is known to not be very good. So those are our thoughts on that. Generally, think the iPad OS announcements were reasonable. Mac OS new features look good. Usual stuff. So generally, a pretty good WWDC, I think, from the consumer's perspective.
Definitely.
Any final comments that we want to take? Start Select says Apple Pay Later is US only. Yeah, because they'll be doing credit applications and other things, so they have to tie in with banks to do that. In McCavey says in Switzerland, most banks boycotted all digital payments, Apple Pay, for years in favour of their solution until they were investigated. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that is that Apple will take a cut.
Yeah,
not a very big cut, but they do take a cut. And they do the same thing with mobile phones. So if you get your iPhone through your network provider on a monthly plan, Apple have a little bit of that as well.
Q Lee says M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch won't sell at all. Why would anyone get that? I know why you're saying that, and I want to agree. But the very fact that Apple are putting it out there means they think it will sell. But I understand why you're saying it.
It is a very popular chassis. People do like that, and even today, actually, it's still good. I mean, I don't like the touch bar, but some people do. Some people do like that.
Turning the volume up and down,
and it does do other things as well. We'll see. Deepak says that after today's event, the M1 MacBook Air is absolute best buy, even in 2022. Completely agree. Yeah. The M1 MacBook Air was, prior to WWDC today, in today's announcement, it was a great value computer that for 90% of people is more computer than they would ever need. And I say it was before WWDC. It still is.
It still is.
Nothing has changed. So
and Start Select's last comment there. M2 MacBook Air has more usable I/O than the M2 MacBook Pro.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Very sage comment. Very insightful.
There was something else, of course, they added, which was support for high impedance headphones.
Yes.
So if you have high impedance headphones, they are supported. Though I have some high impedance headphones and they work fine on your MacBook as well, don't they, Erin?
They do.
Which doesn't support high impedance headphones. So there we go.
Anyway, I think we better draw it to a close there. I think the last comment is from Old Finnish Farmer because it's a lovely sentiment. Thanks, Dave and Pete, for the amazing tech talks. Well, I'm not sure we call them amazing, but we're glad that you enjoy our content. Thanks to Erin for keeping the stream alive. Have you ever seen one of those emojis of the cats playing the piano? That's her. Love your content and view on Apple stuff. Really appreciate all your support. So many joined us tonight, so we really appreciate that. It's nice to have you with us.
Absolutely. We did always say that we'd like to do more live shows and live content, but we have been very busy moving offices and doing other things as well. So,
busy in life.
Yeah. Absolutely, but we do our podcast. We mentioned that before. I'm going to just get another plug-in for that. So if you just go onto youtube.com and search the Constant Geekery podcast, or indeed Google it, you'll find us. It is on a separate channel. It'd be great to have some more people subscribing to that. We probably podcast for an hour-ish, maybe a bit longer sometimes. So
apparently it's quite good if you're walking the dog, cooking, trying to go to sleep. Like to see Erin get lots of abuse, and who doesn't want that?
No. And occasionally we have guest appearances when Pete's off traveling the world, and with his high flying rock and roll lifestyle. And you've got some travel coming up as well, haven't you? I
have. I've got So for those who do view the podcast, I'm away again for a week or two, and then I'll be back for a couple of weeks, and then I'm away again, visiting some clients in various parts of the globe. So yes, that is the way of things. Maybe we could do some kind of remote setup thing, but we'll need to talk about that.
Or I could just get Tom in. I mean, I think most people think he's better than you anyway.
I did notice that in the comments, and for those of you that think that, thanks. That actually cut me to the bone. I shouldn't have said that actually to the people that no.
His hair is more luxuriant than yours as well. So I'm just going to have to say that.
Well, he is. Yeah.
I can say this because look at the state of this.
It is. It's like an arid desert.
It just gets thinner and thinner. It's so sad. Anyway, no one tuned in to hear me talking about that, or
Yeah,
hear
we're
Erin
rapidly
viciously
losing
laughing
subscribers
at me.
now. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
To say that
I
you're
did-
competent would be a gross overstatement, but we appreciate you trying.
I did stuff.
Thanks for joining us. I'll let you do the final sign off.
Yeah, it's been really great just to spend a bit of time with you all. We'll digest all of the thoughts from WWDC and think about maybe summarizing that in a more.
Well, you will.
Well, I'll do that on the main channel at some point, and maybe we'll get one of those MacBook Airs in.
Maybe.
We'll see, and we'll try it out. Obviously, we'll bring you that content if we do so. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheerio.
Constant Geekery.
Bye.
Cheerio, everyone.